Why, hello there. It's that time again. Another month has zoomed by, and we are doing the September wrap-up of everything that I've read in the month of September. This month I read 8 books, which is not a ton for me, but I did have a few events that I went to. One of them that I went to was Josh Malerman's release event for Daphne, and that was pretty awesome. And then I also went to a UFO convention, because I am a weirdo. I've decided with these I'm going to do the indie books first, so I only have one indie book I read this month. I'm slacking. I want to read at least 2 to 3. But this month I only read one, and that was Everything Will Be Alright in the End, Apocalypse Songs by Paul Michael Anderson. I do have a standalone review to this, so I will link that down below. This is a book of short stories, and it's absolutely fantastic, and as the name would suggest, they are kind of like apocalyptic stories. They're stories of dark times, people losing everything, and just, you know, interlaced with some rays of hope in there. And there's some really absolutely beautiful stories in it, and I loved it. I've been really getting into the short stories. This is put out by Cemetery Gates Media, and they just have a wonderful selection of authors and books that they've been putting out. So the next book that I read was The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay, and this is the second book of his that I've read. I also read The Cabin at the End of the World. I read that last month, and that is going to be a movie that's coming out. I don't know if you had a chance to check out the trailer. It's M. Night Shyamalan movie. It looks pretty wild. The book is awesome. I highly recommend reading the book before you see the movie, or if you don't, just go see the movie and then maybe read the book afterwards. Whatever you want to do, you do you. And I imagine with M. Night Shyamalan directing it, it'll be pretty wild. At least the trailer is close to the book. I don't know how what weird ways it'll go further on. But anyways, back to the Pallbearers Club. This was one that I really enjoyed. It was a more calm book. It's in the horror vein, but it's more psychological. So it's not, there's no gore. It's more like, is what I think happening? Or maybe it's not. And you kind of question everything. You question the reality of everything that's happening. It's this story of this guy. He grew up and he was a super nerdy teenager growing up, and he starts this club in high school, the Pallbearers Club, where him and people will go and help out at the funeral home. And the reason he did this was because his counselor said it's good to have extracurricular stuff on there for your college applications, so he starts this club. And surprisingly, a few people actually join, and then he meets this woman named Mercy. She becomes a very big part of his life, and she's a rather strange one. As the book recounts his memoirs, at some point she gets a hold of this and starts making notes all over it, and it recounts like the strange things that happened and how they were remembered, and it's weird and psychological and creepy, and it was really fantastic. And it was like a nice chill break from, like, I had been reading a lot of, I think, kind of slashery horror, and so it was a nice break from my brain to have a calm, not necessarily calm, but like a much more not really anxiety inducing book, and I really appreciated that about it. So then I read Babel by R.F. Kuang. It's a dark academia book, and it follows the story of these, I guess they're kind of gonna be adults. I mean, you start college, when you're 18? So these, I want to call them kids, but I guess these moving into adulthood humans, oh, that's weird. They're picked because they are really great with knowing different languages and how to speak them. So these students end up at Oxford University, where it has this Tower of Babel, and it has this language program where they go and they learn linguistics, and they do translations of all these different works. And then they also have this whole magic system of silverwork. And silverwork, in order for it to take effect, is based off of language and having match pairs. Like, there is, on one side you'll have the English word, and another you'll have one that correlates and is in a different language, and it'll be on each side of the silver bar. And what these silver bars do, or what the silver does, some of it will make a carriage ride smoother, or it'll make their military steamships more efficient. And it also does smaller things that are more cosmetic, like making brighter flowers or enhancing your garden and stuff to this effect. So these students all culminate and they go there, and the whole underlying theme is that they're doing all this stuff, all the money's going into England and the crown, but they're not giving back anything. Basically, it's just going towards all these like rich white people. So these kids are somewhat conflicted. There's also this other society behind the scenes that wants to, you know, take it back and give it back to these countries that are contributing to this. And just the whole cultural thing, it takes a look at just the systemic racism and misogyny and all these different topics, and it was so well written. The question is, are these students gonna, you know, they have like the prospect of, yeah, they have this awesome education, they can have a lifelong career, but they're still treated like second-class citizens, and they could be doing so much good with what they could do with the silver work, like healing people and like helping the poor and lifting each other up, but it's just not happening. So it's a thing of like, what are the students gonna do? Are they gonna keep going with this system, or are they gonna rebel and bring it down? Will Babel fall? I don't know, you'll have to read it. It's so freaking good. That was a 5-star read for me. Highly recommend it. So the next book I read was The Book Eaters by Sun Yudin. It was like a dark horror fantasy. It's this story about these, they're not humans, but they're like they might be like a hybrid type person, because they don't eat food. They eat books, hence the name The Book Eaters. And the Book Eaters come from this kind of like patriarchal society, and it comes to this culmination of trying to break the traditions. Because if you're a woman in the Book Eater society, you are married off twice so you can breed for them, and you have like a 3-year marriage contract. After 3 years, you are taken away from your child and you don't get to raise them anymore, so that's super awesome, right? And they won't allow you to see them. So nothing traumatic there at all, but it's about trying to break down those barriers and overcome that, and then the rebellions that happen, and running from these crazy families, and there's a whole lot of chaotic stuff, and it was so good. I really, really liked it. If you like weird premises and like dark horror fantasy type books, Book Eaters is absolutely awesome. The next thing I read was The Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan, and that was a graphic novel, and I have not read a graphic novel in forever. It was super fun. The illustrations were awesome. The story was wacky and zany, and I like wacky, weird, zany things, so it's perfect. It's about these paper girls, and as it sounds, they, you know, deliver the newspapers. But it was in the 80s. It used to always be like newspaper boys. So newspaper girls, they're trying to break the mold, and stuff just gets really weird. There's these warring time travelers, and, you know, they might rip apart the space-time continuum and just ruin the world if they can't get back to their proper time. So they stumble into this whole time travel war. It's just chaotic, and they bounce all over the time frames of stuff, and it's freaking crazy. From back to like prehistoric times to future times, and will they ever make it back to their time? I don't know, you'll have to check it out. It's also a show on Netflix. I never watched the show. I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't know if I'll end up watching that one. I can't even imagine how they would do it from reading the graphic novel, because it was so freaking wild. But I did enjoy it. It was a really quick read, obviously, you know, graphic novel. But I got where it's all of them combined in one, so it was every single issue of it, which was kind of nice that they had it like that, so I didn't have to buy the separate issues. Oh yeah, the next thing I read was Mary by Nat Cassidy. Oh man, that book was crazy. It was dark and disturbing and gory, and there's weird beliefs happening and voices in your head and visions, and this serial killer that was from this town. And the whole thing is, there's this town that had these serial killings that happened of all these women, and they were horribly mutilated, and they would be found with like pillowcases or sheets of fabric over their heads because they were so horribly mutilated. And this happened. Eventually they caught the guy, and he died, and at the moment of his death, this girl was born named Mary. And Mary, as she grows up, has these really weird memories and stuff that it seems like she might be possessed by this serial killer. We're not sure. We don't know. But just stuff is crazy, and it was, oh man. I read it in a few days. It is a bigger book. I think it was like 400 pages or close to it. If you like really gory and disturbing horror, Mary was pretty great. I really liked it. And then next, I read The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle. This was a novella, and it was based off of a short story that was originally by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, Victor LaValle is a black man, and when he was growing up, he was a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, but as he came into adulthood, he realized H.P. Lovecraft is a racist piece of crap. Now he has a very conflicted relationship with that author, but the story that he based it off of, he didn't really think it was that great of a story, and it took place in New York, and he didn't really feel like H.P. Lovecraft had a good feel for characters from there. So he took that and like the setting and the scene and the story, and he made it into a story of his own with the Ballad of Black Tom, and it's freaking awesome, and I loved it. And it highlights, you know, the systemic racism in law enforcement systems, and you can see how that carries over today too as well. And then it's got all these dark occultish themes, and there's weird stuff like being outside of time and strange entities, and just it is a wild story that was really well told. I love the way it was written, and I also want to read, I heard there's another book called The Changeling that's supposed to be really good too, and I can't wait to check it out. Then the next book I read is Fairy Tale by Stephen King. And this book I had pre-ordered and been waiting on it for a while, and it took me a minute to get to it, but I was not disappointed. This is a fairy tale I had been waiting for some time. I mean, honestly, I haven't really read too many fairy tales recently. I've read a few books that were kind of like loosely based off fairy tales, and this was like a dark fairy tale of more adult proportions. And if you really think about it, if you've ever read or looked at any of the Grimm fairy tales, where they originated, there's some dark, creepy crap in there. Creepy crap. So Fairy Tale follows the story of this 17-year-old Charlie. When he's younger, his mom passes away and she's hit by a car on a bridge. His dad just falls into alcoholism and becomes this like raging, horrible alcoholic. He loses his job. Charlie is thinking like, oh my God, we're gonna end up living under a bridge and having no house. Like, what are we gonna do? One night, Charlie's like, I don't know, I'm just gonna pray to God, and if they can stop my dad from being an alcoholic, I will do whatever you want me to do. Just show me the way, show me what to do. And then that next day, one of his dad's old buddies that he used to work with stops by, who was a former alcoholic, and he helps the dad get sober. And so Charlie's like, all right, well now I gotta keep this promise, because he doesn't want his dad to ever drink again. There's this house down the way that they called like the psycho house, and there's this old man and this scary dog that lives there. And one day he's driving his bike by the house and he hears this like howling and barking, and so he stops and he goes in the backyard and he finds the old man who lives there, and he's fallen and broken his leg and he's in severe pain. And so he saves this guy's life. He decides he's gonna, you know, help him out and be there and help care for him, because he's like, all right, this is where my keeping my promise comes in, you know. This goes on and he takes care of him, and he really develops like a relationship with him and with the older man's dog named Radar. And eventually he stumbles upon this other world, and it's a cursed world in this fairy tale. He goes there to see if he can prevent something from happening. I don't want to go too into spoilers, so I won't say too much more, but it was really well told and I really loved it. I love the characters, I love the setting. Possibly a new Stephen King favorite for me. Also, if you're interested in any of these books, I'll have links down below for them. Those are affiliate links, so a little bit goes to the channel and also goes to support indie bookstores, so support your indie bookstores. And if you like videos where I talk about multiple books that I'm reading, the next video coming up will be about multiple things that I have read. So stick around, check it out. And if you had fun hanging out today, boop that like button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.